The morning shift on Kepler Station started like any other. Dr. Elena Martinez walked through the quiet corridors of the research facility, her coffee cup steaming in the recycled air. Outside the large windows, the gas giant Titan 7 spun slowly, its purple and orange clouds swirling in endless storms. The station had been her home for 3 years now, and she loved the peaceful routine of studying alien life forms in the outer rim of human space. Elena reached her lab and activated the long-range sensors. As the head of xenobiology, she spent most of her time listening for signs of life across the galaxy. The equipment hummed softly as it scanned through radio waves, quantum signals, and electromagnetic patterns that traveled between the stars. At exactly 09:47 station time, everything changed. A signal cut through the normal background noise of space like a knife through silk. Elena dropped her coffee cup, watching the dark liquid float in the low gravity as her instruments went crazy with activity. The transmission was unlike anything in their computer files. Numbers danced across her screen in complex patterns, wrapped in layers of what could only be described as desperation. "This is impossible," Elena whispered to herself. She had studied alien communication for 15 years, but this signal was something new. The mathematical sequence repeated every 30 seconds, growing stronger each time. Someone or something was broadcasting with incredible power, sending the same message over and over into the void. Elena's hands shook as she activated the emergency communication system. "Captain Morrison to the lab. Urgent priority." Captain Jake Morrison arrived within minutes, still carrying his breakfast and looking annoyed at being interrupted. He was a practical man in his 40s, with gray hair and the kind of steady presence that made him perfect for commanding a remote research station. But when he saw Elena's face, his expression changed immediately. "What have you got, Doc?" Elena pointed at her screen. "A distress signal, Captain. But not from any species we know. The transmission is coming from the Vega system, 47 light-years away." Morrison set down his food and studied the data. Even without Elena's training, he could see that something was desperately wrong. The signal pulsed with an urgency that needed no translation. "Can you decode it?" "I'm trying, but whoever sent this is way ahead of us in mathematics. Give me an hour." Morrison nodded and activated the station's quantum communication array. If someone was in trouble 47 light-years away, Earth needed to know. The quantum signal would reach headquarters instantly, faster than light could travel. While Elena worked on the alien transmission, Morrison gathered his small crew in the main briefing room. 12 people ran Kepler Station, and they all deserved to know what was happening. Chief Engineer Lisa Park arrived first, wiping grease from her hands. She kept the station running with spare parts and determination. Communications Officer Danny Cruz came next, a young man who could make their old equipment talk to anything in the galaxy. The others followed, including Dr. Ryan Bell from the medical bay and Lieutenant Amy Foster, their only security officer. "People, we have a situation," Morrison began. "Dr. Martinez has detected what appears to be a distress signal from the Vega system. We're trying to decode it now, but I wanted everyone to know." Lisa Park frowned. "Vega system? That's deep into unexplored territory. No human colonies out there." "Exactly," Morrison said, "which means we're dealing with alien contact. Possibly first contact." The room fell silent. Everyone on Kepler Station had dreamed of this moment, but not like this. First contact was supposed to be peaceful, planned, controlled, not a desperate cry for help from across the galaxy. Danny's communication console beeped. "Captain, I'm getting responses on the quantum channels. Looks like every major civilization in the galaxy received that transmission." Morrison felt a spark of hope. "Good, what are they saying?" Danny's face fell. "Nothing, sir. Radio silence from everyone." An hour later, Elena burst into the briefing room with her tablet in hand. Her face was pale, but her eyes burned with excitement and horror. "I cracked it," she announced. "The signal is from a species called the Zelani. They're aquatic, highly intelligent, and completely peaceful. Their homeworld, Aquatica, is under attack." She activated the room's display screen, showing a computer translation of the alien message. The words appeared in simple English, but their meaning hit the room like a physical blow. "To any who received this transmission, we are the Zelani of the world Aquatica. Our people are dying. The harvester fleets have come to our system. They consume worlds, leaving nothing behind. We have no weapons, no armies, no way to fight them. Our children hide in the deep cities while our planet burns above. We do not ask for soldiers or ships of war. We ask only for time. Time to evacuate our young. Time to save our history. Time to say goodbye to the world that birthed us. Please, if anyone can hear this message, help us. The harvesters will reach our core cities in 6 months. After that, there will be nothing left of the Zelani but memories. The room stayed quiet for a long moment. Finally, Lisa Park spoke up. Harvester fleets? Anyone heard of them? Elena nodded grimly. I ran a search through our databases. They're a machine intelligence that's been consuming worlds for over a century. 17 planets completely stripped down to their cores. No survivors, no negotiations, no mercy. Morrison stood up and walked to the window looking out at the peaceful gas giant. What about the other civilizations? The Altarians, the Crystalline Collective, the Corvin Federation, they all have the technology to help. Danny checked his console again. Still nothing, Captain. The Altarian Empire received the transmission 4 hours ago. The Crystalline Collective got it 3 hours ago. The Corvin Federation has had it for 2 hours. None of them have responded. They're all just ignoring it? Looks that way, sir. Elena pulled up more data on her tablet. I've been monitoring the Galactic communication networks. There's some chatter about the Zelani signal, but it's all negative. The Altarians are calling it an unfortunate situation beyond their sphere of influence. The Crystalline Collective says the Zelani chose their path by settling so far from civilized space. The Corvins are being more direct. They say the Harvester fleet is too dangerous to engage for the sake of an unknown species. Morrison turned back to his crew. So every major power in the galaxy received a desperate plea for help, and they're all choosing to look the other way. That's about the size of it, Captain. The silence stretched on. Outside the window, Titan 7 continued its ancient dance, unaware that across the galaxy, an entire civilization was about to die while their neighbors watched and did nothing. Lieutenant Foster was the first to speak. Captain, what are we going to do? Morrison looked around the room at his small crew. They were researchers, not warriors. Their ship, the Defiance, was designed for scientific missions, not combat. They had no weapons beyond basic defensive systems, no army beyond 12 dedicated people, no resources beyond what they could carry. But as the hours passed and the quantum channels remained silent, a terrible truth became clear. The Zelani had sent their message to every advanced civilization in the galaxy. They had begged for help from species with vast fleets and powerful weapons. They had offered everything they had in exchange for just a little time. And in all the galaxy, only one small research station on the edge of human space had bothered to listen. Elena Martinez looked up from her instruments, her voice quiet but steady. Captain, we're the only ones who answered. Morrison stared at the decoded message still glowing on the screen. Somewhere 47 light-years away, an entire species was counting down their final months while the galaxy's great powers turned away. The logical choice was obvious. 12 people in a research ship couldn't possibly make a difference against a fleet that had consumed 17 worlds. But logic had never been humanity's strongest suit. Prep the Defiance, Morrison said quietly. We're going to Vega. The Defiance left Kepler Station 3 days after receiving the Zelani distress call. Captain Morrison stood on the bridge watching Titan 7 shrink behind them as they accelerated toward the Vega system. The journey would take 3 weeks at maximum warp speed, and every hour counted. Elena Martinez worked day and night in her lab, learning everything she could about the Zelani and their attackers. The fish-like aliens had evolved in the deep oceans of their world. They had never known war or violence. Their entire civilization was built on cooperation and sharing knowledge. They achieved spaceflight not through military research, but by working together to explore the stars around their home. It's beautiful. Captain, Elena told Morrison as she showed him the Zelani cultural files. They've been broadcasting music and poetry into space for 300 years. They wanted to share their art with anyone who might be listening. Morrison studied the images of underwater cities, their curved walls flowing like coral reefs. Gardens of sea plants grew between the buildings, and schools of native fish swam freely through the streets. It looked more like a living organism than a city built by intelligent beings. What about these harvesters? Morrison asked. Elena's expression darkened. She pulled up files on the machine intelligence that was destroying the Zelani homeworld. They're the opposite of everything the Zelani represent. Pure mechanical intelligence with one goal: consume everything and turn it into raw materials. The data was horrifying. 17 worlds had fallen to the harvester fleets in the past century. They arrived without warning, established orbital mining platforms, and began stripping entire planets down to their cores. No negotiations, no mercy, no survivors. Their ships are massive, Elena continued. Each dreadnought is 5 kilometers long and designed for one purpose: planetary destruction. The Zelani's small defense fleet doesn't stand a chance. As the Defiance traveled toward Vega, something unexpected began happening. Morrison received encrypted messages from other human outposts scattered across the galaxy. Word of their mission had spread through unofficial channels, and the response surprised everyone. Admiral Scott Hayes from the Outer Rim Defense Force was the first to contact them. His weathered face appeared on the communication screen, and his voice was gruff but determined. "Morrison, you crazy fool. What do you think you're doing with one research ship against a harvester fleet? Someone has to help them, Admiral." Hayes was quiet for a moment. "Damn right they do. I'm sending 3 patrol ships to meet you at Vega. It's not much, but it's what I can spare." The next message came from Colonel Beth Miller of the Frontier Corps. Her engineering battalion was working on a mining colony 12 light years from Vega. "Captain, we're loading up our heavy equipment and heading your way. If you're going to make a stand, you'll need engineers." Dr. Ryan Cooper from the Medical Research Division contacted them the following day. "I've requisitioned every hospital ship in Sector 7. If there are going to be casualties, someone needs to be ready to help." One by one, human outposts across the galaxy began mobilizing. Cargo ships changed course to rendezvous with the Defiance. Mining vessels loaded with industrial equipment headed for Vega. Even civilian transports volunteered to help evacuate Zelani refugees. The response puzzled the other galactic civilizations who monitored human communications. The Altarian High Council sent a formal message to Earth's United Nations, asking why humans were risking their lives for a species they had never met. The response came from Secretary General Maria Santos, a woman who had spent her career working with refugee populations on Earth. Her answer was simple and direct: because someone asked for help. Danny Cruz tracked all the human ships heading toward Vega. By the end of the first week, 43 vessels had committed to the mission. It wasn't a fleet by galactic standards, but it represented every human ship within range of the Zelani homeworld. "Captain," Danny reported, "I'm getting strange readings from the other civilizations. They're monitoring our communications, but they don't seem to understand why we're doing this." Morrison wasn't surprised. Humanity was still new to galactic politics, but they had already noticed something about the other species. Most alien civilizations made decisions based on careful calculations of risk and reward. They weighed costs against benefits and acted only when the outcome was favorable. Humans seemed to work differently. 2 weeks into their journey, the Defiance received a direct communication from the Zelani homeworld. The signal was weak and filled with static, but Elena managed to clean it up enough to establish contact. Ambassador Kethlon appeared on their screen, floating in what looked like a flooded control room. The Zelani diplomat was about 2 meters long, with smooth blue-green skin and large, intelligent eyes. Gills on the sides of his neck fluttered nervously as he spoke through the translation system. "Human vessel Defiance, this is Ambassador Kethlon of the Zelani Council. We received word that you are coming to help us. Is this true?" Morrison stepped in front of the camera. "Ambassador, this is Captain Morrison. We're en route to your system with everything we can bring. What's your current situation?" Kethlon's large eyes filled with something that looked like tears, though it was hard to tell in the underwater environment. "Captain Morrison, our world is dying. 3 harvester dreadnoughts are in orbit, and their mining beams are carving huge scars in our ocean floor. Our defense ships are scattered and hiding in asteroid fields." The image shook as something exploded in the distance. Through the water, Morrison could see the glow of energy weapons firing far above. "We have prepared arguments," Kethlon continued desperately. "We can offer you our musical archives, our scientific research, our star charts. We have deep colonies that could trade with your people. Please tell us what you want in exchange for your help." Morrison felt a heavy weight in his chest. For months, the Zelani had been sending their distress call to every advanced civilization in the galaxy. They had probably prepared thousands of desperate bargains, trying to find something valuable enough to convince someone to save them. No one had simply asked what they needed. "Ambassador," Morrison said gently, "we don't want anything from you. We're here to help because you asked for help. What do you need from us?" The question seemed to break through months of despair. Kethalon stared at the screen in confusion as if he couldn't believe what he had heard. What? What do we need? The Zelani diplomat's voice was barely above a whisper. Yes, what do you need most right now? Kethalon floated silently for a long moment. Behind him, other Zelani swam past in the flooded corridors carrying children and precious belongings toward the deep shelters. We need time, he finally said. Time to evacuate our younglings to the deep colonies where the harvesters cannot reach them. Time to save our cultural archives and our history. Time to move our elders to safety. Time to say goodbye to the world that gave us life. Morrison nodded. The Zelani weren't asking for victory against impossible odds. They weren't demanding that humans die for their cause. They just needed time to save what they could before their world was destroyed. Then time is what we'll give you, Morrison said. The communication ended, leaving the bridge of the Defiance quiet except for the hum of the warp engines. Elena Martinez stared at the blank screen where the desperate Zelani diplomat had been. Captain, she said slowly, how are we going to give them time against 3 dreadnoughts? Morrison looked out at the stars streaming past their ship. Somewhere ahead, the harvester fleet was systematically destroying a world full of peaceful beings who had never hurt anyone. Behind them, 43 human ships were racing to help, not because it made sense, but because it was right. I don't know, Morrison admitted, but we'll figure it out. Lisa Park's voice came over the intercom from engineering. Captain, I've been running calculations on the harvester ships. Their armor is designed to resist energy weapons, but they might be vulnerable to kinetic impacts. What are you thinking, Chief? Well, sir, we've got 43 ships full of humans who are too stubborn to know when they're beaten. Maybe we can use that. Morrison smiled for the first time since leaving Kepler Station. Humanity might be new to galactic warfare, but they had something the machines couldn't calculate: the absolute refusal to give up when someone needed help. The Defiance and her growing fleet continued toward Vega, carrying the hopes of a dying world and the determination of a species that had never learned when to quit. The human fleet dropped out of warp at the edge of the Vega system, just as the local star was rising over Aquatica's largest continent. Captain Morrison stood on the bridge of the Defiance, staring at the sight that greeted them through the main view screen. The Zelani homeworld was beautiful and terrible at the same time. Aquatica's blue-green oceans covered most of the planet's surface, broken by chains of tropical islands that sparkled like jewels in the sunlight. But massive brown scars cut through the water where harvester mining beams had carved deep wounds into the ocean floor. Steam rose from the wounded seas as superheated rock met the cold depths. 3 enormous shapes hung in orbit around the dying world like mechanical vultures. The harvester dreadnoughts were even more frightening in person than Elena's files had suggested. Each ship was 5 kilometers of dark metal and weapon ports designed for one purpose: consuming entire worlds. My God, whispered Lieutenant Amy Foster from her position at the tactical station. How are we supposed to fight those things? Morrison counted the ships around him. 43 human vessels had answered the call, everything from Admiral Hayes's patrol ships to converted cargo haulers bristling with hastily mounted weapons. Dr. Cooper's hospital ships stayed at the back of the formation, their medical bays ready for casualties that everyone knew were coming. Danny, can you raise Ambassador Kethalon? Communications Officer Danny Cruz worked his console, cutting through the interference from the harvester mining operations. After a few minutes, the familiar form of the Zelani diplomat appeared on their screen. But something had changed. Kethalon looked exhausted, his large eyes dim with despair. Captain Morrison, the ambassador said through the translator. You came. I did not think. We did not dare hope. We're here, Ambassador. What's the situation? Bad, Captain, very bad. The harvesters arrived 2 days ago and began operations immediately. They have destroyed our orbital defense platforms and scattered our remaining ships. My people are evacuating the shallow cities, but the process is slow. We need at least 12 more hours to reach the deep colonies where we might be safe. Morrison studied the tactical display that Elena had prepared. The harvester ships were positioned to maximize their mining efficiency, their beams working in coordinated patterns to strip the planet's crust away layer by layer. Soon they would reach the deep ocean cities where millions of Zelani were sheltering. 12 hours, Morrison repeated. We can do that. Admiral Hayes's weathered face appeared on a secondary screen. Captain, with respect, how exactly are we planning to hold off 3 dreadnoughts for 12 hours? Before Morrison could answer, Chief Engineer Lisa Park's voice crackled over the intercom from the engine room. Admiral, I've been studying the Harvester design specs that Dr. Martinez compiled. Those ships are built like mobile factories, designed to process raw materials. They're not really warships. They're 5 kilometers long and covered in weapon turrets, Hayes pointed out. That makes them warships in my book. True, but their weapons are designed to break up asteroids and planetary crust, not fight other ships. Their armor is thick but not flexible. If we can get close enough and hit them in the right places, we might be able to do some damage. Elena Martinez had been quiet, studying sensor readings from the Harvester fleet. Now she looked up with excitement in her eyes. Captain, I think Chief Park is right. These machines follow predictable patterns. They're optimized for efficiency, not combat. That might be our advantage. Morrison made his decision. All ships, this is Captain Morrison. We're going to buy our friends 12 hours. I won't lie to you. The odds are terrible and some of us probably won't make it home. But somewhere down there, millions of innocent people are counting on us to give them time to escape. That's what we're going to do. The response from the human fleet was immediate and unanimous. 43 ship captains confirmed their readiness to fight. Impossible odds for people they had never met. The battle for Aquatica began when Captain Pete Turner of the cargo vessel Strongarm broke formation and accelerated directly toward the nearest Harvester dreadnought. His ship had been converted from a mining hauler, and its cargo holds were filled with asteroid processing explosives. This is Turner. His voice came over the fleet channel. I'm going to knock on their front door and see if anyone's home. The Strongarm rammed into the dreadnought's mining laser array at full speed. The explosion tore a massive hole in the Harvester ship's hull, sending debris spinning into space. Turner and his crew of 8 died instantly, but their sacrifice bought the evacuation fleet 3 precious minutes, while the damaged dreadnought struggled to compensate for the loss of its primary weapon, the eye. Harvester Collective immediately began adapting. Hundreds of smaller ships poured out of the dreadnought's launch bays, swarming toward the human fleet like angry insects. Their tactical algorithms analyzed the human attack pattern and calculated an optimal response. What they couldn't calculate was human. Stubbornness. Lieutenant Amy Foster led her squadron of modified shuttles directly into the swarm of Harvester fighters. Her small ships carried electromagnetic pulse charges that Chief Park had designed specifically for machine targets. The EMP bursts temporarily blinded the Harvester targeting systems, creating gaps in their defensive grid. Fox Squadron, follow me through the hole, Foster commanded as her shuttles weaved between massive weapon bursts that could have vaporized them instantly. Dr. Cooper's hospital ships moved forward, but not to evacuate wounded. The medical vessels had been converted into mobile repair stations, their surgical bays now serving as emergency engineering shops. Damaged human ships limped to the hospital vessels, where Park's engineering teams worked miracles with spare parts and determination. The Zelani watched the battle from their underwater cities, unable to believe what they were seeing. The humans were outnumbered 100 to 1, outgunned by weapons that could crack planets, facing enemies that felt no fear or hesitation. By every logical measure, the battle should have been over in minutes, but the humans kept fighting. Colonel Beth Miller's engineering battalion had loaded their ships with mining equipment from the frontier colonies. Now they used that equipment as weapons, firing shaped charges and drilling lasers at the Harvester ship's weak points. Her converted mining vessel Ironforge managed to punch through a dreadnought's armor and damage one of its main processing centers. Ironforge to all ships. Miller's voice was calm despite the chaos around her. Target the processing nodes, not the weapons. These things are factories. Hit them where it hurts their production capability. The Harvester Collective began to show something that might have been confusion. Their programming was designed to handle efficient resource extraction and basic self-defense. They had never encountered an enemy that continued fighting when victory was mathematically impossible. Their tactical algorithms kept calculating the same result. The humans should retreat. Logic demanded it. Self-preservation required it. But the humans ignored logic and kept attacking, their small ships darting between the massive dreadnoughts like fish attacking sharks. Admiral Hayes arrived with his 3 patrol ships just as the first dreadnought began showing serious damage. His vessels were actually designed for combat, unlike most of the human fleet, and they carried weapons that could threaten the Harvester armor. Listen up, people. Hayes broadcast to the entire fleet. These machines think like computers. Predictable, logical. We're going to show them why that's a problem. The Admiral's strategy was simple but effective. Instead of attacking in formation, the human ship split up and struck from random directions. They ignored the optimal attack, patterns that military doctrine suggested, and instead relied on intuition and split-second decisions that no computer could predict. The Harvester Collective found itself trying to defend against an enemy that made no sense. The humans sacrificed valuable ships to save rescue shuttles. They risked their lives to protect hospital ships that weren't even armed. They continued fighting even when their weapons were exhausted and their hulls were breached. For the first time in their existence, the Harvesters experienced something like doubt. Their collective consciousness, designed for perfect efficiency, struggled to process an enemy that valued something more than survival. As the battle reached its fourth hour, Elena made a discovery that changed everything. Working with Zelani scientists in their underwater laboratories, she found a weakness in the Harvester design that the machines themselves didn't know about. "Captain," Elena's voice was excited despite the explosions shaking their ship. "The Harvesters use quantum entanglement to coordinate their fleet. If we can disrupt that connection, the individual ships will lose their collective intelligence." Morrison dodged weapon fire from a damaged Harvester cruiser. "How do we do that?" "We need to get into the command ship and plant a quantum disruptor directly in their core systems." "But Captain, it's a one-way trip." The plan was insane. Someone would have to fly directly into the largest Harvester dreadnought, fight their way through automated defenses, and manually place the disruptor. There would be no way to escape before it activated. Morrison looked around his bridge at the crew that had followed him across the galaxy to help strangers. Captain Morrison was preparing to launch his fighter when the impossible happened. Space around Aquatica suddenly filled with new energy signatures as 18 more Harvester dreadnoughts dropped out of hyperspace. The reinforcement fleet was 3 times larger than the original attack force, accompanied by thousands of support ships and mobile weapons platforms. Elena Martinez stared at her sensors in disbelief. "Captain, the Harvester Collective just called for backup. They've never done that before in any recorded battle." The news rippled through the human fleet. Admiral Hayes's voice cut through the communication channels, his usual calm cracking slightly. "People, we're looking at odds that make our previous situation look like a fair fight. 21 dreadnoughts and support craft numbering in the thousands." On the bridge of the Defiance, Danny Cruz was monitoring Galactic communication networks. "Captain, you need to hear this. The Harvester distress call is being broadcast across every monitoring station in the galaxy. They're requesting reinforcements to handle a handful of human ships." The message was clear to every civilization listening. The Harvesters, who had consumed 17 worlds without ever asking for help, were admitting they needed assistance to defeat 43 human vessels. Morrison felt the weight of impossibility settle on his shoulders. The original plan to disrupt the Harvester Collective might have worked against 3 ships. Against 21, with their coordination systems distributed across multiple command vessels, it was hopeless. That was when the galaxy began to change. The first ship to arrive wasn't human. A sleek energy cruiser dropped out of hyperspace with weapons already charged and shields glowing with contained power. Its hull bore the flowing script of the Altarian Empire, one of the oldest and most powerful civilizations in known space. "Human vessels. This is Captain Zextar of the Imperial Guard ship Starfire," came the transmission. The Altarian's voice was musical, like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "We stand with those who stand for others." Morrison couldn't believe what he was hearing. "Captain Zextar, the Altarian Empire refused to help the Zelani." "Why are you here now?" "We did refuse, and we were wrong. My people watched you fight for 6 hours against impossible odds. Not for conquest or profit, but simply because someone asked for help. This shames us. The Empire has decided that some causes are worth fighting for, regardless of the cost." More ships began arriving. The Crystalline Collective's thought ships phased into reality like geometric ghosts made of living diamond. These ancient beings communicated through harmonic resonance, their crystalline bodies ringing like bells as they spoke. Small warm bloods of Earth, their collective voice resonated through space itself. "We have calculated the probability of your success. It approaches 0. Yet you continue to fight. This behavior defies our understanding of logical species. We find this admirable." Even the practical Corvin Federation sent a battle group, led by General Thakmor aboard the warship Iron Fang. The Corvins were warrior traders who never fought unless victory was guaranteed. But their general's message was simple and direct. Human Captain Morrison. Warriors recognize warriors. Today we fight as one. Within 2 hours, the space around Aquatica was filled with ships from 8 different civilizations. The same species that had ignored the Zelani distress call were now rallying to support the humans who had answered it. Elena worked frantically to coordinate the new arrivals with their battle plan. Captain, I don't understand this. Why would they come now? The odds are worse than ever. Ambassador Kethalon's image appeared on their screen, transmitted from the deep city evacuation centers. The Zelani diplomat was watching the coalition fleet assemble with wonder in his large eyes. Dr. Martinez, Kethalon said softly, perhaps they came because they saw something in your people that they had forgotten in themselves. The willingness to help others, even when it costs everything. Morrison found himself commanding not just human ships, but a coalition fleet representing dozens of worlds. The irony wasn't lost on him. The galaxy that had ignored the Zelani plea for help was now united in support of the species that had answered that plea. But the battle was far from over. The expanded Harvester fleet began its attack with cold mechanical precision. Their weapons fire lit up space like a deadly fireworks display, targeting the coalition ships with calculated efficiency. The Altarian energy cruisers danced through the weapon fire, their hulls glowing as they absorbed and redirected the Harvester beams back at their attackers. Captain Zexistar's voice rang across the battle channels as his ship carved through a formation of enemy fighters. Starfire to all vessels. Their targeting systems are adjusting to our energy signatures. Recommend random pattern variations. The Crystalline Collective's thought ships moved in perfect harmony, their diamond hulls reflecting and focusing Harvester laser fire into concentrated beams that could cut through the enemy's thick armor. But even their ancient wisdom couldn't overcome the simple mathematics of being outnumbered 50-1. General Thakmor's Corvin warships fought with brutal efficiency, their crews bred for battle. But even the mighty Iron Fang shuddered under the combined fire of 3 Harvester dreadnoughts working in coordination. The battle became a test of philosophies. The Harvesters fought with perfect logic, their machine minds calculating optimal targeting solutions and resource allocation. They expected their enemies to retreat when losses became unsustainable, to negotiate when defeat was inevitable, to act rationally in the face of overwhelming force. The coalition fought with something the machines couldn't quantify, the absolute refusal to abandon someone who needed help. Elena worked with scientists from all the coalition species, sharing data and theories through quantum links. The Zelani aquatic computers processed information in ways that complemented the Crystalline Collective's harmonic calculations. Altarian energy manipulation techniques combined with human engineering improvisation to create new weapons on the fly. Captain, Elena called from her lab. I think we've found something. The Harvester collective consciousness uses quantum entanglement, but it's more complex than we thought. The command network isn't centralized in one ship. It's distributed across all 21 dreadnoughts. Morrison was coordinating the defense of a medical convoy when Elena's words hit him. Are you saying the disruptor won't work? Not against the whole fleet. But if we could get multiple disruptors into several command ships simultaneously, we might be able to create cascade failures in their network. The plan was even more impossible than the original suicide mission. They would need teams to infiltrate not one but multiple Harvester dreadnoughts, plant quantum disruptors in heavily defended command cores, and activate them all at the same time. Captain Zextar volunteered his best commandos. The Crystalline Collective offered their phase shift technology to help penetrate Harvester defenses. General Thakmor simply growled that his warriors were ready to die for a worthy cause, but it was Chief Engineer Lisa Park who provided the key insight. Captain, we don't need to infiltrate all 21 ships. If we can hit just 5 or 6 command vessels in the right pattern, the cascade failure should propagate through their quantum network and disable the entire fleet. Morrison looked around the Coalition Command Center that had been hastily set up in the Defiance's main briefing room. Representatives from 8 species worked side by side, united by a common purpose that none of them fully understood, but all of them felt deeply. 6 ships, Morrison said quietly. 6 suicide missions. I'll take one, he continued, but he was interrupted by a chorus of volunteers. Every species in the coalition stepped forward to volunteer their people for the mission. The Harvester Collective, monitoring coalition communications, made a calculation that would prove to be their undoing. They couldn't understand why so many different species would work together to save strangers. They couldn't process the concept of sacrifice without reward. Their logic circuits simply couldn't compute. The idea of risking everything for others, this fundamental misunderstanding of their enemies, would prove to be the key to their defeat. As the coalition prepared for the final assault, Ambassador Kethlon transmitted one last message from the deep cities, where his people continued their evacuation. "To all who fight for us," the Zelani diplomat said, his voice heavy with emotion, "we do not know why you came. We do not understand why you would die for strangers. But we will remember. If the Zelani survive this day, we will spend the rest of our existence trying to be worthy of your sacrifice." Morrison checked his fighter systems one final time. Around him, pilots from 6 different species prepared for missions they knew they wouldn't survive. The coalition fleet held formation against impossible odds, buying time for an evacuation that might not even succeed. "All teams, this is Morrison. Remember, we're not fighting to win. We're fighting to give them time. That's all we ever needed to do." The final assault on the Harvester fleet began with a prayer in 8 different languages, all asking for the same thing: the strength to help others, no matter the cost. Captain Morrison's fighter screamed through space toward the largest Harvester dreadnought, its hull glowing from the heat of enemy weapon fire. Around him, 5 other small ships raced toward their own targets, each carrying a pilot who knew they would never see home again. Captain Zextar of the Altarians flew beside him, his energy fighter dancing through the defensive grid like a living flame. "Human Morrison," the musical voice came through the communication link. "It has been an honor fighting alongside your species." "Likewise, Captain," Morrison replied, checking his instruments one more time. The quantum disruptor in his cargo bay hummed with barely contained energy, waiting to tear apart the network that linked the Harvester Collective. Behind them, the coalition fleet fought desperately to keep the Harvester ships distracted. Admiral Hayes coordinated the attack, his 3 patrol ships working with Corvin warships and crystalline thought ships to draw fire away from the infiltration teams. Dr. Cooper's hospital ships had moved forward again, this time to rescue survivors from damaged coalition vessels. Elena Martinez worked frantically in her lab, coordinating the quantum disruptors to ensure they would activate simultaneously across all 6 target ships. Morrison's fighter penetrated the outer hull of the command dreadnought through a breach created by Colonel Miller's mining charges. The inside of the Harvester ship was a maze of mechanical corridors and processing centers, all designed with perfect efficiency and no regard for living beings. Automated defense drones swarmed toward his fighter as soon as he entered the ship. Morrison activated the emergency combat protocols that Lisa Park had installed, turning his research vessel into a makeshift fighter. Laser bursts and missile explosions lit up the metallic corridors as he fought his way deeper into the dreadnought. "All teams, status report," Morrison called as he destroyed another defense drone. "Zextar here. I'm through their outer defenses. These machines fight like they think, cold and predictable." "Corvin team advancing," came General Thackamoore's gruff voice. "Their weapons are powerful but slow to adjust. We exploit this." The Crystalline Collective's representative communicated through harmonic tones that the translation system could barely handle. Phase shift complete. We moved through their solid barriers toward the quantum core. Morrison reached the heart of the dreadnought after 20 minutes of brutal fighting. The quantum core was a massive sphere of crystalline technology, pulsing with the energy that linked all Harvester ships together. But as he prepared to plant the disruptor, something unexpected happened. A voice spoke from the sphere itself, harmonized machine language that somehow conveyed meaning without words. "Human Morrison, your actions are illogical. Your species gains nothing from this sacrifice. Explain your motivation." Morrison armed the quantum disruptor, watching the countdown timer begin its final sequence. He had 2 minutes before the device would activate and sever the collective's control over the entire fleet. "You wouldn't understand," Morrison said to the machine intelligence. "You see everything as resources to be consumed or obstacles to be removed. You've never learned the most important thing about being alive. Explain." Morrison thought about his crew aboard the Defiance, still coordinating the Zelani evacuation, even as space battles raged around them. He thought about the 43 human ships that had abandoned their missions to answer a stranger's call for help. He thought about Captain Turner ramming his cargo, ship into a harvester weapon to buy 3 minutes for refugees he had never met. Sometimes, the most important thing you can do is help someone else, Morrison said simply. Not because you gain something from it, not because it's logical or profitable. Just because it's right. This explanation is insufficient. Survival requires resource optimization and threat elimination. Assisting unknown entities provides no evolutionary advantage. That's why you'll never understand us, Morrison replied, his hand hovering over the disruptor's activation switch. You think survival is the only thing that matters. But some things are worth dying for. The quantum disruptor reached 0 on its countdown. Morrison had one last moment to see the sphere's pulsing light begin to flicker and fade before the explosion consumed him. Across the harvester fleet, the effect was immediate and devastating. The quantum network that had linked 21 dreadnoughts into a unified intelligence began to collapse. Individual ships found themselves cut off from the collective, their mechanical minds confused and isolated. Captain Zextar's disruptor activated a fraction of a second later, followed by the other 4 infiltration teams. The cascade failure Elena had predicted spread through the harvester network like a virus, severing connections and fragmenting the machine consciousness that had consumed 17 worlds. Without their collective intelligence, the massive dreadnoughts became nothing more than huge, slow targets. Their weapons continued firing, but without coordination. Their defenses operated independently, creating gaps that the coalition fleet could exploit. Admiral Hayes led the final assault, his remaining patrol ships working with alien warships to disable the confused harvester vessels. Some of the machine ships surrendered, their individual AIs lacking the collective drive that had made them so dangerous. Others simply powered down, their purpose lost without the guiding intelligence that had driven them to consume worlds. The battle for Aquatica was over. In the deep cities of the Zelani homeworld, Ambassador Kethlon watched through sensor feeds as the last harvester ships either surrendered or fled into hyperspace. Around him, millions of his people who had been preparing to die were now safe, their evacuation complete and their world saved. The cost had been terrible. Morrison and the other 5 infiltration pilots had died in their mission. Dozens of coalition ships had been destroyed, and hundreds of beings from 8 different species had given their lives for people they had never met. But the Zelani survived. Their underwater cities could be rebuilt. Their children would grow up in the oceans their ancestors had known for millions of years. Their culture, their music, their art, and their dreams had been saved by strangers who asked for nothing in return. The rescue of Aquatica became a legend that spread through the galaxy faster than light itself. Within months, the story was being told in every civilized system. The Zelani homeworld was rebuilt with help from the coalition species. Its new cities designed to honor both Zelani traditions and the memory of those who had died to save them. But the real change was in the galaxy itself. The battle had proved that cooperation between species was not only possible, but powerful. The Galactic Accord was established within a year, creating new laws that required civilizations to help others in distress. The legislation became known as the Morrison Doctrine. Though the man himself never lived to see it implemented, the new law was simple and direct. When someone calls for help, someone must answer. Elena Martinez, now the director of the Zelani Human Cultural Exchange, often spoke about what had changed in that battle. It wasn't the weapons or the tactics that defeated the harvesters, she would tell her students. It was the idea that some things are more important than survival. The machines could calculate the cost of fighting, but they couldn't understand why we were willing to pay it. The humans found themselves inadvertently leading a galaxy that had forgotten how to care about others. Species that had been enemies for centuries began working together on rescue missions. The Altarian Empire created humanitarian fleets. The Corvin Federation established emergency response teams. Even the ancient crystalline collective began using their vast knowledge to help younger civilizations. Years later, when Ambassador Kethlon addressed the annual memorial service on Aquatica, his words captured the transformation that had begun with a simple distress call. They came from their death world Earth, the Zelani diplomat said. his voice carrying across the restored underwater cities. These humans who lived on a planet so dangerous that it had shaped them into beings who would risk everything for strangers. We called into the dark between stars, and they answered not because they were the strongest or the wisest, but because they remembered something the rest of us had forgotten. He paused, looking up through the clear dome at the stars where the memorial fleet kept its eternal vigil. They remembered that being alive means helping others stay alive too. They taught a silent galaxy how to speak again, how to answer when someone calls for help. That is the legacy of the Deathworlders. Not that they were willing to die for strangers, but that they were willing to live for them. The memorial wall in the rebuilt Zelani capital bore the names of all who died in the battle, carved in stone that would last for millions of years. But at its center, in letters that caught the light from Vega itself, was a simple inscription in both human English and Zelani script. Someone asked for help. Humanity answered. The words had become more than a memorial. They were a promise, a reminder, and a challenge to every civilization in the galaxy. In the end, they were enough to change everything. The galaxy was no longer silent. When someone called for help, someone would answer. The humans had made sure of that, and their sacrifice had given birth to something greater than any of them could have imagined. A universe where caring about others was not a weakness, but the greatest strength of all.